that we've set up React Router in our app, let's add some routes. So we're going to use the route component to set up routes within our application. Routes, when they're added to our application, are a way to get to a destination. They describe the view, the component that we want to render when we're at a certain URL in the browser. So let's take a look at the syntax for adding the route component and defining our first route. So here we've imported the component route from React Router DOM, and it's important to note that everything we're going to import from React Router DOM is going to be a component. These are JSX components that we can use inside our JSX anywhere. All right, now let's look at the route that we have defined in our code. So writing routes with React Router DOM is as declarative as we can get within React. What I mean by that is try saying this sentence as you look at this piece of code. I have a route that when the URL is at the path/users will render the component users. That is basically the definition of declarative. We can declare exactly what we're thinking in code inside our application. So let's take a look at the path and component attributes here. The route component needs to have the path component to tell our application what to render when we're at that specific path. So with this example, when we're at the path/users in our application, in the URL, it's going to render the component that we tell it to render. And that's where the component attribute comes in. The component attribute tells it which component to render when we're at this specific path. So now let's take a look at a bigger example where we are going to define a couple more routes inside our application. First, our user requests the home route, which is usually found at just /. So it's our base URL. Sometimes you'll see the / in the URL, sometimes you won't. So a user requests / the path /, so we will mount the home component. Then if a user requests /contact, we shall mount the contact component. And finally, we'll have a /about route. So when the user requests /about, we will render the about component. Here's the code that will match these different situations, these different cases. We've got a route for our home component, and this route, when the user is at the path / inside the browser, it will render the home component. And same with contact and about. When we're at those paths, then the correct component will be mounted. We are going to have one problem here with these specific routes. And that is when we're at /contact or /about, our home route is still going to be rendered to the DOM. So at the top of our page, we'll have the home route, and then underneath it, we'll have either the contact or the about components, depending on which path we're at. This happens because React Router, the route component that we're using here, uses regex to check the URL and then to render the appropriate component. But this isn't an exact check. So when we're at /contact, technically we are still at /. There's just more stuff after, there's a longer string after the / in the URL. But the route component will still render our home component even if we're at /contact. So let's take a look at how we can fix that. Introducing the exact prop. We have our same situation with the same routes, but you'll notice that on the home route, we've added the prop exact to this route. What this will do is it will do an exact regex match with that particular path. So when our user is at the path / in the URL, then the home component will be rendered. But if the user goes to /contact or /about, then the home component will no longer render because we've used the exact prop. All right, let's take a look at our Avenger app, and we're going to declare some routes for this application. All right, here's my Avengers app. Please open your Avengers app that you started in the last video and follow along as I build out some of these routes for our Avengers application. So first we want to create a home route. So we're going to create a home route, and then we want to create a route for /Avengers so that we can show a list of Avengers at that route. So what we do first is import route from React Router DOM. Then inside our app div, we're going to declare our two routes. There we go. Okay, then on our routes, we need to have a path attribute, and we need to have a component attribute. First route is going to be our home route, so it's going to be at the /path, and it is going to render our home component. Now for this one, as we talked about in the slide deck, we need to add the exact property here. Then our next route is going to be /Avengers, and it is going to render the component Avengers list. I don't have these defined yet, so we'll have to go and create our these two components. So inside my source file, or folder, I'm going to create a new folder called components. Then I'm going to build a home.js file and an Avengers list.js file. All right, let's build out our home component first. Import React. And this is just going to be a functional component called home. And this component's not going to take in any props. It's just going to return a header that says Avengers database. Feel free to make this however you'd like. This is how I'm going to build this out. then we have to wrap this in a div. Then we will export default this component. Now I have some CSS that I'm going to add to my app here. And if you go to TrainingKit, in this section, there is a link for this same code if you'd like to follow along exactly with what I am doing inside my application. Okay, so we have our home app built out here. Now we're going to import this into our app.js. And now we have home defined. So let's go, and we now have to build out our Avengers list. If we tried to start up our application right now, we would get an error saying that this is not defined. So let's build this out real quick. I'm just going to copy all of this. Here we go. And we'll just call this Avengers list component. Now we can go back to our app.js and we can import this. If we spell it correctly, there we go. And now we have our two components ready. So let's go to our browser, and there we go. So take a look at this. We are at our /route. So we're at our /path right here, and you can see that we have rendered our home component. So let's take a look at this in the DevTools here. So inside our React DevTools, we open up our app component, and you can see we have two routes here inside our DevTools. Now, one of these routes has something inside of it, and that is our home route. So whatever path we're at inside our browser, that route is actually going to be rendering something inside like this. And you'll notice that our other route here doesn't have anything inside of it. It's empty. But I love that the React DevTools still prints this out inside the tab here, because I think it's important to see a list of our routes and then see which one is active and which one actually is rendering something. So really cool that they do that for us. If we look at our elements, so if we inspect this, we have our div, our app div here. We have this div, which is coming from our home component, and then h1, h4, and then the closing of all that. So inside our actual HTML, there is no mention, no sign of our Avengers list component, which is also really cool. So React will look at the route we're at. In the HTML, will only render that component. There's nothing else on the DOM other than that component. But inside the React DevTools, we do see both routes here, but only one is actually rendering something. Cool, so now let's go look at /Avengers. So go to your URL, type /Avengers, and there we go. Now we have our Avengers list component. And you'll see that now Avengers is rendering something and home is not. So there we go. We've got our two routes defined and working. Let's now add some data and build out this Avengers list component. So again, in TrainingKit, there is a link to add data to our application. So what we're going to do is inside our folder here, inside our application, we're going to add a data.js file. Then go to that link, which I'm going to go to it here, and you'll see a JavaScript file here. Now the best way to do this, sometimes when you copy straight from something like this and you see those little white lines in between there and the numbers on the side, you might get some odd characters inside that copy and paste along with this that could throw off some of your code. So go to this file, click on raw, then you can just Command or Control A, copy and paste. So we have const Avengers here. It's a list of Avengers. We need to export this. So we're actually going to delete this here, or you know what, go to the bottom and just do export Avengers like this. Then we can, actually we're going to export default Avengers like this. Then back inside our app.js, we'll import Avengers from ... So we have to go out of our source file. Well, it depends on where you put it. You may have put this inside your source file. I tend to put data outside of our source file so that it kind of mocks a little bit closer a real application. So we're going to import Avengers from ... data. So now we want to set this to the state of our component. For tonight, we're just going to do this.state. We're going to say Avengers is going to be Avengers. Then we're going to, so now we have that available in our app component, but now we need that passed to our Avengers list. Right now we don't have a way to do that, so we're going to copy all of this, and we're going to go to our Avengers list and import it into our Avengers list component here. We'll fix this in the next couple videos, but for now this is the only way we have to get data to this component. Since I have some CSS here, I am going to follow the different classes that I have. So if you are using the same CSS, then you'll have to use the same class names as I use. This one is going to be characters list wrapper. And that is our wrapping div component or div element. Then inside our div, we're going to loop over our Avengers data with .map. We're going to pass in, we're going to look at one Avenger at a time. and we're going to return some JSX here. So for this, I'm going to create a div with the class name character card. And then of course we have to have a key on here, and this is going to be character.id, or excuse me, avenger.id. Okay, now inside our div, we are going to start with an image. Our image is going to have the source character Avenger. So let's take a look at our data real quick. Okay, so we've got an ID. Looks like we have 2 images here. Let's go for this list. We're first going to use the thumbnail for this image. So we go back to Avengers list, and we're going to say Avenger.thumbnail for our image source. And of course we'll add an alt, and we'll just give it the name of our Avenger. Next, we are going to have a h2 header that is going to be the Avenger name. And then finally, we're just going to have a p tag that will be the nickname of our Avenger. So we've got name and nickname. We're going to throw parentheses around this nickname in this character card. So we'll do parentheses around it. And then inside the parentheses, we will do Avenger.nickname. Save all the files, and let's go check out our application. Okay, this is easy to fix. So it looks like we can't put data outside our source, which is just fine. We'll just drop it inside the source folder here, and then drop this off, and then inside our app.js, that. Save all the files, and look at that, there we go. We have a list of our 9 Avengers displaying here at our Avengers route. Nice job. Just to test it, you can go back to /event/ to make sure we're at our home. We can go back to /Avengers and render our list of Avengers. And there we go. We've learned about the route component, and we've added some routes to our application.